Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Today, I'm actually going to be putting two cards head to head because the 470 launch is upon us. It's the 4th of August, but it's a partner card launch. So I've got a couple of the partner cards and I thought, to be honest with you, I don't want to make loads of separate reviews. I'm just going to yomp them in together and put them head to head because without a reference card for me to really compare them to, I need them to be together for me to actually have something to talk about in the first video. Now, there has been an awful lot of kind of talk and confusion where we've been talking about MSRP. So it's the manufacturer suggested retail price. Now it is just a suggestion. And if people meet that suggested retail price, it probably means that they've cut a lot of corners. Well, not necessarily cut a lot of corners, that would be a bit harsh, but you're not going to get a premium product. You can't expect all the cards to be the same price. Now we're being told that the MSRP for cards is going to be around £179.99, so £180 give or take. So with the MSRP being at that price, you can't then necessarily expect to have an all screaming, all dancing, awesome water-cooled card, for argument's sake, coming in at that price also. And it's the same with different coolers and different speeds and overclocks and adding stuff on. Now we do know that the Asus is actually going to be £189.99, so it's only a tenner extra, which is quite good in Asus language, to be honest with you. The tax rate on that isn't that great. Sapphire are still doing a bit of Laurel and Hardy where they're like, and they don't know at the moment. And literally they were like, we don't know. And they didn't give me any official quotes, but reading between the lines, it could be anything from £179.99 up to £195. So they could go above the Asus, but I'm kind of assuming that once I finish this video, they're not going to be asking for the £195 price. And you will see why, and it's probably going to be totally the opposite thing to what you're expecting. So we have two cards. They're also very different, beside the fact that they are just 470s. So stay tuned because you might find this interesting and you'll learn a little bit more about the way that the new AMD cards are working as well. So what have we got? What's the difference? So with the 480, you might be confused why I'm going with the 480, but we have to start with the 480 so that we can find out what the difference is from the 480 and how they've kind of downsized or downclocked, or however we're going to talk about it, the 470. So with the 480, we had 36 compute units and 2,304 stream processors. The real other thing to kind of pick up with this one, because we can compare the teraflops, is the peak performance is 5.8 teraflops. And then we've got the memory bandwidth, the memory interface, 256-bit. You can see the 224 gigabits a second for the memory bandwidth there. Anyway, when we mix in the 470 as well, what we can see with this is we've only got 32 compute units. So there's 4 compute units less. That means we've got 256 stream processors less. That means our peak performance drops by 0.9 teraflops. We go from 5.8 down to 4.9. And we can compare those because it's the same chip. So it's actually a fair way of doing it. And then what we can say is that you lose 13 gigabits a second of memory bandwidth, but you're still on the same memory interface. So that's all the technical mumbo jumbo out the way. So cards side by side. Now this is the time when I would personally say that having them like this is probably the only way that the Asus looks better. I do like the angular design to this. It's kind of stealth fighter-esque, and it's the Direct CU2 cooler that we've got on this as well. Problem is yes, when you look at this one, it is a little bit bland and some people don't like the dimples, but when we get past that point, it gets a little bit more complicated. Now I think Sapphire might have had problems with their fans in the past because they've gone to a lot of effort for you to be able to change these. With that little screw there, you literally undo that one screw and it clips out, and there are 4 little contact points that you can see down here. And anyway, you can take that out and it means that you can clean it easily, but also means that if your fans go wrong, it's a really simple thing to replace, and you can do that at home. So you might not have to RMA the whole card to be able to replace the fans. Something that you can see, if you look through the little gap there as well, you can see that you can see the box. And that's because on the back plate, there are little cutouts here. But the fans actually go out to the outside. So the tips of these fans are going to be blowing at the back plate. So you're going to get some of the air coming out here, some of it going around the black. So it's going to actually help cool the back plate a little bit. This here is RGB, and you can actually change it quickly through this. There are a few different settings on it, but if you want to manually set the color to, for argument's sake, red, you're going to need their software, but you can flick through different modes here. Also, this way, which is what it's on now, is your kind of quick overclock mode, which is 270 megahertz. You can flick it this way, goes down to a silent mode, and that's 1200 megahertz. So you've got a V-bar switch here. If you can flick it, and it's not going to matter if you flick it in the middle of your operating system, but you do need to reset for it to show up. The other really nice thing about this is the power is here. So with the power being here, it makes your cabling all really nice and tidy, and we do obviously have that back plate. I'm not too sure on the silver so much. I think I would have preferred a little bit more black to have kept it a bit neutral, but at least it's got a bit of a design on it and it's not boring. With the Asus, we've got the two cards, two fans that are on it. They're not massive fans, but they do stick out. So you can see here, but the problem is they stick out, and to me, the fact that we've got that plastic shroud line there, and we can see the big chunk of alley on this with no backplate, it instantly looks like a cheaper card. I think that the Sapphire, when you kind of go like that, this looks a much more premium and sorted product. All the lines kind of meet up. It just feels that little bit nicer. Whereas this, to be honest with you, aesthetic-wise, especially when you consider the other Strix cards that have come before this, I think it's a bit of a letdown. One of the good things is it does still have the 4-pin header here, which you can control from the GPU tweak software in Asus, so you can actually have a case fan hooked up to this that is controlled by the GPU fan temperature. That's kind of cool. This is RGB. You do kind of get a little bit of hover up here, and it's actually a really nice white as well. When you do have it to white, it does look a decent white, but it's it's full RGB. You can sort of play around with it, but one of the most important things is really the aesthetics on this. It's kind of night and day, and if you're going to buy a card and you want it to look the part as well, oh crikey. Didn't do that on purpose. The Sapphire straight away is hands down a better looking machine. So, performance. Okay, so I told you before that they've gone about things in a very different way with this, and I didn't just mean aesthetics. I mean under the hood as well. They do share the same 270 megahertz overclock, but we have a problem because when it comes to overclocking with this card, as I've proven with other cards that I've reviewed, the overclock isn't really the be-all and end-all. This one does have a 270 megahertz overclock, but it's actually being held back because they've been set up in slightly two different ways. In that you have a power slider and a power percent slider and a temperature slider. So the Strix is actually been given a 60 degrees power target, whereas the Sapphire has been given a 75 degrees power target. Now, because of that, that means that with the power target being at 75, this one is getting more power, means it's using more power. It also means it's going to get warmer, because it can do up to and around the 75 degree mark. We ended up getting 77 degrees on this one. Asus only 60, but actually performed worse because of it. So, and it is a bit of a complicated one. And what I will do is I'm going to go through the scores with you. Then when we get to kind of the conclusion-y bit, I'll explain the differences as well, and then you can just decide on your own before I tell you what I think. I might surprise you. So when we bring the temperature graph up, you've got 77 degrees for the Sapphire, even though it had a 75 degrees power target. So, you know, it went a little bit over than it should have done, really. I would also say, strangely enough, that even though the Asus is right down at the bottom at 60 degrees, the Asus was actually the most quiet. It was night and day. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about temperatures and stuff when I go into extra depth about power and all that type of stuff. When we move on to 3D Mark Firestrike Ultimate, straight away you can see that the Nitro is in front. In our testing, although we have had a driver change because some of the 470s have actually managed to perform better than the 480s just because of driver changes in the same games. But anyway, this was practically a 480. Now that's not going to say that it's across the board. If we retested the 480 would probably be a little bit more in front now. But anyway, with the Nitro being given that extra juice as well, which is the most important thing, that is the reason why it's in front here. And it's 300 points, which in Firestrike Ultimate is a big difference. When we move on to games, one of the things I will say is go and have a look on the Overclock 3D website, because we've got all of the games there, and I do want to try and explain something, because a lot of people are people are losing their mind that we're not doing Doom with Vulkan. Doom with Vulkan is an absolute nightmare to get the scores out, because you have to use Presentmon. And it's also a bit inconsistent as well. We've actually run the same card a few times and had like quite different scores every time. So what we decided to do, we were doing an AMD review the other day where some of the AMD fanboys were saying I'm doing it to try and gimp the performance. I'm really not. It's just that it's such a mare to get the scores out. We've decided until it becomes a little bit easier, and this is where the point comes from, when it becomes a little bit easier so you guys can actually go and check the scores for yourself as well, we've decided that we're not going to do it until then. Another reason for it is, yes, you can do it. The other reason is because, to be honest with you, it is such a mare that when we're short of time, we just wouldn't be able to. We do know that there is a Vulkan and Direct X12 update for Fraps coming. We've been talking to Fraps for the last the last kind of month, and it is very much in progress. We're hoping it's going to be within the next sort of 6 weeks. The second that update is with us, we will probably start publishing scores. But, and this is the bit that we've not said, all of the reviews that we've done since all of the big launches recently, we have actually been benching Doom. So we've been looking at the scores, and for us, they're a little bit too inconsistent. So that is our reason behind it. Not that we're trying to gimp, the performance differences between them. Anyway, on to this. Sleeping Dogs. You'll notice that there's only 1080 in the graphs, and it's that these are really aimed at being like really nice 1080 cards. I don't think that you're going to buy one of these cards and then plug it into a 1440p monitor. Also, with us only really having a couple of days, taking out the 1440 results and the 4K results meant that I could actually get 2 cards done for launch rather than not bothering at all and waiting until next week. So with this, you can see that you actually do get like a good 5 frames per second difference going from the 60 degree power target up to the 75 degree power target. When we move on to Hitman Direct X12. Now, Hitman Direct X12 literally is, and this is when all the like AMD people were saying that, we should be doing Vulkan, all that kind of stuff. Hitman Direct X12 is practically made for these things. Like the new AMD cards, it's a Hitman game. That's basically it. And it kind of speaks for itself here. And I mean, you've got the 470 Nitro here. It's clearly in front of the 1060 Strix, the 1060 Amp, and the 1060 Founders Edition. The only one that's at the bottom is the Asus. Then when we go on to Rise of the Tomb Raider, again DirectX 12, the Nitro is actually above the 480 Strix. It's also above the 480 Overclock. The Strix 470 only just gets in front, and it's really not even by like a great deal. It was literally like hundredths of a frame, but it did get in front of the 480 reference. So I did say to you, I talked to you about power targets and stuff like that. And that is because essentially with the this, even though it has got the 1260 megahertz overclock, because the power target, temperature target is 60 degrees, it doesn't get enough juice to be able to get the most from it. In that, you can actually turn down the overclock to pretty much 1150 megahertz. I think it was 1160 something. You can get all the way down and the scores don't go down because it's just working up to the amount of power that it's got. And that's just a new thing with these AMD cards, where you've got to get them in their preferred power envelope. So with Sapphire being warmer, because they've given it more juice, which is where it comes from, put the power target up, means it can boost more, it chucks more of the juice in. That's simply why it's performed better. So what I did is with the Asus, I opened their GPU tweak software and I put their power target up to 80 degrees and it performed exactly the same, and in some scenarios better than the Sapphire. So if Asus are going to be saying at me, yeah, but you've only got to move a slider and it'll be all right. Yeah, but no, because essentially this is where I think it should be. These have got like 3 different modes on them. You've got silent mode, and the scores do go down when you're in silent mode. Gaming mode, scores go down, and then you've got the overclock mode. But what they say is, because I have asked them about this, because I was like, the WTF? I said to them, what's going on? Why? And they said, no, well, see, Asus think that the card should be cool and quiet, which it is. It is cool and quiet. They've done a very good job with that, but it's at the detriment of performance. And it's because they say that what happens if someone in Egypt buys this, they want their card to be that little bit cooler, because then when it goes into the hotter environment, the increase in temperature won't be that bad. In that, if they had had a 80 degree power target or a 75 degree power target on this, and it had gone to Egypt, that it might have then been ended up throttling. Where my reply to that is, if it's in overclock mode, it should be getting enough juice to get the most from that overclock. Because as it stands at the moment, that 1260 megahertz is nothing more than something on a box for someone to look at and think they're going to be getting a quick card. They're not. So with the overclock mode, I think it should be getting enough juice, so as I've proven, they perform exactly the same, because it's pretty much the same core underneath. If it's going to go somewhere like Egypt and they want one that's just going to run cooler, they've got silent, gaming and overclock in the settings where you can literally go in and tick it. Why not have a cool option in the GPU tweak, so that then if you're in Egypt or in the middle of the Sahara, or you've not got much, you're in a small case maybe, or you've not got much cooling in the case, you can tick on that cool mode and it will reduce the power target, which will bring the temperature down. Sorted. But if you're going to have an overclock mode, it shouldn't be gimped by not enough power, which is what this is, which is kind of a shame. It's also making me worry quite a bit that when I start reviewing other 480s, they are going to absolutely hammer the Asus ones, even though they've got these amazing coolers. So that's all the reason behind it. So the fact that it's got an overclock mode that is kind of pointless is actually why, in the end, I decided, and I put that down very nicely, I didn't want to, I decided not to give the Asus an award. But with the Sapphire, it wasn't the quietest, even though it was allowed to get warmer, and that was even compared to when the Asus, I boosted it up. As I've shown you that the Asus is actually capable of it by moving that power slider. They should have done that with the overclock mode out of the box. And the weird thing is the Asus was quieter with that boost wound up. So despite the fact that this is big and chunky, makes a little bit more noise, and people are going to say, why haven't you done a noise test? Well, the problem is if you do a noise test, you need to be in a silent room, and there's no way I can do that without staying up all night to wait until everything is whisper quiet. So I've not bothered with that. I've not got a sound chamber I can lock myself away into. But for me, the Sapphire is quicker, which at this end of the market, whether it ends up being 180 quid or 195 quid, at this end of the market, most people are going to fit it and forget it. Also, if you are in Egypt, there's a little flip switch on this one. You can just flick it, temperatures drop, and it does downclock itself, so you do lose a bit of performance, but it's still there for you to be able to go with. It's, I would say, immeasurably better looking as well. It feels like a more premium product. You've got that back plate. It all just feels little, you know, much more chunky. Everything lines up. So for me, that is the reason why we gave this. And we didn't know whether to go with it, whether we went with Performance Award, whether we went with Enthusiast. It was all a bit kind of up in the air really, but it doesn't really matter because at the end of it, I mean, they're both as capable, but the setup on the Asus is what's letting it down. If you move past that and you're not fussed about it and you can just turn that power slider up, this one looks better. And when you're down at this end of the market as well, you want a pretty looking card. This is pretty much just the 480 with a different kind of heart in it. It's almost like the 480 with a pacemaker on it or something like that. But I did just favour the Sapphire. So you can make your own mind up with the award. I'm not even going to bother putting it up on the screen. Do you think this should have been performance? It's a bit warmer, but it's quicker. That kind of fits. Enthusiast, you don't have to spend £700 on a graphics card to be an enthusiast. We all have to live within our limits. And sometimes, you know, spending 180, 190 quid on the right card can put just a bigger smile on our face, which is the most important thing when we're gaming with our friends, is your mate with a huge bill that he's stressed about, worrying about paying off because he's bought, you know, two £700 cards, and you're just as happy playing the same game, albeit maybe on slightly lower settings or on a slightly lower resolution, you could be just as happy. Anyway, bit of a shocker, yes, 470. I actually really like them. It comes in at a really decent price. This is probably going to be the AMD card of choice. But as I've said, the difference between them is going to be the ability of the cooler to keep that extra heat down, because you need to open that power target up to be able to get them to work better. It's probably the want of a better term. Otherwise, you end up with a card like the Asus, which is, for want of a better term, and I hate this word with a passion, but it is being strangled, and that just makes me think of bottleneck. So, as the great Lord Clarkson once said, on that bombshell,